Oh, welcome back. I hope my long-time subscribers will forgive me for going just a little bit further down this rabbit hole. We do have some of our regular topics that I know you've been waiting on. I promise I'll get to those. But you all understand that this channel is driven by our comment section, and in just a few days we've had so many comments on that previous video that we did that I felt that it was important to do this follow-up video based on not only the comments that we've had, but also some information that's come to light regarding the affidavit that the police have released, as well as some of the additional eyewitness accounts that tell us a little bit more about how the shot was set up and what may have happened there. But the comments, and I do read them all, I interact with a few of you, showed me that there was something in the previous video, well, two things actually in the previous video, that I don't feel that I adequately covered, because there were a lot of repeat questions regarding that. And the biggest among them was why people are still asking, why are real firearms used on the set? And so I apologize, I didn't go into great enough detail when I was talking about the chamber pressures. So let's talk a little bit about safety, because ironically, the reason that they use real firearms is because of safety concerns. Now you're going to say, oh, that sounds strange, that sounds asinine, but bear me out. So if I'm an armorer on a site, on a production, if they're using Old West firearms, then it becomes my job to try and recreate every aspect of an Old West firearm and make it safe so that it shoots blanks and that doesn't harm the actor firing the weapon or harm somebody else. Oh, that's a monumental task. The fact that there are already existing firearms, modern firearms that have additional safety features that that even the Old West guns didn't have, that I now have to recreate all of those safety features rather than just using an existing firearm and modifying that to suit the production. Oh, that's a scary thought, to be honest. And then also I have to be accurate and true to the original when these are already readily available. So I think what people aren't understanding is that the decision has already been made to shoot a Western, to do this, or to have a Batmobile fly through a waterfall and land. You've already made the decision to do a physical effect that might be relatively dangerous to pull off. And so now you're into, well, how do we mitigate those dangers? And if it's your job to design a firearm for Harrison Ford that is going to fire blanks, right, then it makes perfect sense that you're going to then hide a real revolver inside the prop firearm to make that possible, so that you don't wind up having something that explodes in Harrison Ford's hand while he's trying to film a shot. And so, as odd as that sounds, it is actually done for safety reasons. Now, especially in terms of Old West type shoots where you're going to be putting blanks in the firearms, because there have been some safety advancements in these firearms that were not obviously in the original weapons. And so one of those is that there's what's called a Holstercock. You can't really see that. I'll show a magnified version of that for you all. But it allows the firearm to have a pre-cock, so that when it's in its holster, that there's no way to strike the back of the firearm, the hammer, to have the firing pin actually encounter the round and go off. Right? And again, that was a safety feature that the original firearms didn't even have. So the other thing that was that came up frequently was props. right? The nomenclature that is used depends on your context. If you are in the context of the film as a whole, everything is a prop. Regardless of where it came from, it's a prop. And I believe, folks that are in industry can correct me if I'm wrong, that the prop department, the armorer is actually under the prop department's purview, because they have to be approved so that all of the props that are used and all of the actual firearms that are used are appropriate for the film. And so that makes sense. I was told that by somebody in industry, and so that made sense to me. So I can see that. Does that mean it supersedes it for safety? No, not at all. It's separate in that regard. We'll talk a little bit about that. But it does mean that for the purpose of moving forward here, we are going to have to differentiate somehow between a prop firearm, replica, right, and a actual firing weapon, if you want to call it that, an actual firearm. And the way that I want to do that is I want to use the nomenclature that we used from the previous video, and these will be referred to as hero guns from here on out. And so that way, that will allow us to make an understanding that though every gun is a prop, whether it's fake or an actual firearm, that there are distinctions to be made from those weapons that are designed to be seen from a close distance or designed to be seen firing. So that's with that done, now we can move on to what we know about the reconstruction. So let's start talking a little bit about the setup of the whole thing. So one of the things that someone had asked, I believed, in either the comment section or somebody possibly had asked me this, a friend of mine, was what they meant by cross draw, because he says, he was practicing quick draw from a cross draw holster. Well, this is a cross draw holster, and it's attached to a cartridge belt. I apologize for not wearing it, but one thing that Alec Baldwin and I do have in common is that we haven't missed many meals since 2006, so my cartridge belt unfortunately no longer fits me. But these were favored by the cowboys because they did a lot of sitting. Sat in the saddle, sat in the buckboard, sat in a saloon, and they needed to be able to have access to their firearm. Right? And they needed to have it stored in a comfortable way. You saw Val Kilmer's depiction of Doc Holliday, where he wore a cross-draw holster that was in what looked like a shoulder rig. Those were also very common. Those types of holsters were much more common than what you think of today as your Wild West low-slung kind of quick-draw holster. But that gets us into at least understanding some of what was going on with the way that he was situated. Now we know from the affidavit that the camera was in front of him. He was seated in a church pew, right? And that he was practicing his fast draw. All right. Now, I'm going to try and do this video without getting into a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking. I'm going to try and just set up a number of different scenarios to give you all an idea of where responsibility may lie in what eventually happened. So, if you are the armorer on set, all right, the one thing that was terribly concerning to everybody was that how was it possible that a live round got into the chamber? So one of the things that was very disturbing to Mr. Thomas, and one of the things that was very disturbing to me as well, was that there are reports that they were using these firearms for target practice in the desert, just on set. Remember that this is a ranch, it's in an unincorporated area, and so it is actually legal to do that. You need to find a berm or some other area where you have where you're shooting in a safe distance. So it is legal to do that. But on a set of a movie, it's phenomenally stupid, monumentally stupid. I can't stress how much of a break in protocol that is. Now, that isn't to say that having the actors have familiarity with the firearms is a bad thing. When you look at John Wick, one of the folks that were commenting, they said, "Oh, he didn't get that fast with snap caps." Not alone he didn't, but the snap caps allowed him to be able to practice at home and get the familiarity that he needed to, and then obviously he's fired thousands of rounds out of actual firearms to manage to get the fluency and the fact that he can then pick up a firearm on set and immediately look like he knows what he's doing, because he does know what he's doing. And so if I were an armorer on a movie similar to that, I would stress to the director and to the producer the importance of having the actors actually have some experience with the actual firearm. I'd take them to the range. Even before we went to the range, like I do with friends, I introduce them to the firearm with snap caps. I watch and show them how to load and safely unload the firearm without while maintaining pointing it down range in a safe direction. All this stuff is incredibly important. So please don't make too much of the fact that the actors were actually shooting the actual firearms, but let's lay the blame where it really belongs. No way should they have been doing this on location. No. So, if the armorer is doing their job, what they would have done is they knew that Alec Baldwin would be practicing a draw, that there was going to be camera, there's going to be direction. In other words, that people are going to be close by him saying, "Hey, hold your arm like this," or running back to the camera to check focus. And so all of this stuff, and lighting, all this stuff is absolutely critical. Now the armorer knows this. They've got a shoot sheet for the day. They know what's going on. They know that, oh, he's going to be practicing. And so what is he going to need? He's going to need snap caps. All right, so the armorer then loads a firearm with snap caps. And these are aluminum replica bullets that have little rubber bumpers on the back of them. They then place that on a cart, apparently from some COVID nonsense. And again, I'll explain kind of how these nonsense excuses seem to kind of add up, and some of them just don't make sense. So we'll talk a bit about that in a minute. But the armorer then sets this out on the cart, and I don't know how they identified on the cart that these were cold guns, or I don't know. But at that point, the assistant director apparently chose one of these firearms that he knew he was going to take to Alec Baldwin to do this. And this is exactly how long this takes. Half cock, open the gate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All I see in there are red bullets with rubber bumpers where the primers are supposed to be. I then take it into the church. "Mr. Baldwin, cold gun." What does Alec do? Half cock, open the gate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's exactly how long it takes to make sure that a young man doesn't grow up without a mother. I cannot stress to you how important that simple act was. That in total, we looked at less than 12 seconds. And because two people didn't do that, somebody got killed and another person shot in the shoulder by a live round, because apparently people were too stupid not to realize that they shouldn't be plinking in the desert with the hero guns. All right? So now we have a firearm loaded with blanks, or not blanks, excuse me, my apologies, loaded with snap caps that Mr. Baldwin puts into the holster. Now, there's been a lot of folks saying, "Oh, well, you know, this particular firearm was prone to accidental discharge." Now, one of the reasons why that could be, right, is that some of these firearms are actually set up for doing what's called fanning. Right? And so that means that when you cock the hammer back the first time and pull the trigger, if you keep the trigger pulled, you can then bring the hammer back, and because the trigger is still pulled, when you let go, the firearm goes off again, and so that allows you to fan the trigger. Well, if the firearm has a bad sear on it, it may mean also that when that hammer is pulled back, that the trigger hasn't engaged. There isn't a sear to stop the hammer from coming back. So when you drag it back with your thumb and let it go to what you think is on the on a trigger, that the firearm then goes off. Now, that's what I suspect happened with the misfirings that had happened previously. But what did Baldwin just do? What should he have just done, right? He made sure that there wasn't anything in the gun. So when this thing misfires, as he's in his arc, we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, then nothing happens, except he goes, hey, we've got, this isn't going to work when we get a primer in here, when we get a blank in here, the sear is bad on this. And in one of the comments, I think it was actually Mr. Thomas had said that, well, that gun should have been in a trash or in a museum. Well, first of all, it's probably not a museum piece. It's likely that it's a reproduction firearm, not an actual Colt. You can buy single action Colts, 1800 series Colts today as new firearms. So it probably wasn't an old firearm. And then the other thing is that they are mechanical pieces. They are repairable, and they do get wear, and the parts are available to repair them. As a matter of fact, again, these firearms, this one is a bit longer barrel than the one I had yesterday, but this and the shorter barrel cousin, I've had these for 20 years, and I've replaced mainsprings on them. I've replaced other parts on them that wear. So no, the issue isn't with the fact that the firearm was going off in the arc. But let's talk about that for a minute. So you have him seated in the church pew. It says the camera was in front of him. It wasn't too clear where the others were standing. It said next to the camera. Not sure which side. I'm not sure if this was supposed to end with him drawing towards the camera. Was it designed with him drawing to the other side of the camera? They said he was drawing in an arc. Was he trying to go all the way out to that side? What matters in this is that he was cocking the hammer back. This firearm will not go off unless he is drawing the hammer back. Now you'll see the cylinder going around. Now that's what's called clocking, right? As you're pulling the hammer back, you're seeing that the cylinder is rotating. Unless the cylinder rotates perfectly in line, two things won't happen on a properly maintained firearm. The hammer will not go all the way to the cylinder. It had better not, because if it's not quite clocked all the way and the hammer goes off, the bullet won't come out the end of the gun. The bullet will smack the frame. It might shave off some of the bullet might actually go off, but you'll get spatter on the actor's hands or people standing around. And so from the standpoint of a dodgy gun, this is all only important if you have blanks in the firearm, or if you have actual bullets in the firearm. If you're actually on the range and a revolver goes off when it's somehow, when it's not fully clocked, you can have a catastrophic failure of the frame. But now we get to ask ourselves, is that likely in this case? Is it likely that that is what happened? And I'm going to say no. When you're looking at Baldwin's actions, I'm going to say that he cocked the thing back fully, right? And he had his finger on the trigger, because that's how you handle these. You cock them, you aim them, then you let go and you discharge. That's generally the way that you handle a single action Old West firearm, right? Now, that explains then why it went off. Not that it slipped off, not that the gun malfunctioned or any of that. No, Baldwin had his finger on the trigger. He's practicing. He's trying to get this as fast as he can I screwed that up, right? So I guess I need practice, which is why you do this, right? You have to get that right. Now, you heard that click. You heard where that happened as I was bringing it across. That means that I've got the firearm fully ready to fire. And at any point, if I've got my finger on the trigger and my hand comes off, then it can go off. Does that mean that he didn't pull the trigger? Oh no, it does not. Now, when you're filming the actual scene and you have blanks in the firearm, if that was what was supposed to happen, if he was supposed to draw, cock the firearm, and discharge, then you have plexiglass in front of the camera, you have plywood, perhaps protecting other pieces of equipment. The camera might be run remotely or behind a piece of plexiglass is fine. If you're talking about something that's this close, that would be, I'd say that would be reasonable. And where he discharges, like we discussed with the Wild West shows, there's nobody there for X number of feet. Right? And if there's something that you have to protect, like a stained glass window in a church or whatever, you put up some plywood or even cardboard, depending on the distance. And he touches it off in a safe direction, right? Knowing that everywhere along his arc, there's nobody that's going to wind up with a piece of wadding in the eye or flaming unburnt powder to burn them. Or I've seen somewhere they had one had a negligent discharge in one of the Wild West shows that we did, and someone had been struck from this direction. It blew his hat off, and he had unburnt powder strike him in the side of the face. So blanks are not to be trifled with. There is something coming out of the end of that firearm, and you have to set everything accordingly. But a bullet coming out of the end of the firearm. Wow. So now let's take a quick look at how something like that could have possibly happened. Now I hear a lot of folks say, oh, well, you know, Alec Baldwin wasn't qualified to know the different blah, 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 blah. He's spent enough time around firearms. He knows what he's looking at. But there are a couple of ways that would perhaps exonerate him from all of this. What was the low budget on this? You know, what was the budget on this movie? Now, we've already mentioned that these are aluminum rounds. They have a rubber button in the back. They look very, you look at them and you know that this is not a round. In addition, you've already gone through a safety briefing. So you know, these actors know what it's supposed to look like. So did somebody tamper with the firearm? Did they take a firearm that had snap caps and put a live round? This is not a live round, this is a dummy round, but it is one of those that looks like a real round. And again, we touched that in the other video. Why do you have these on the set? Well, because you have cartridge belts and everything else that's supposed to have what look like bullets in them, and so you have these. And then also you've got firearms sometimes highly magnified from the front, not shooting, and you need something that looks real from the front. But this will be our stand-in for an actual live round that somebody, for nefarious intent, put in the firearm on the cart. Right? What happens? Well, the assistant director, because the armorer had left the cart for whatever reason, right? We'll just assume that, you know, when you have people around you who have nefarious intent and they have intimate access to you, you're not going to be safe. That's not going to be something you can ever fully guard against. You just can't. That's why when a homicide investigator first comes to a scene, the first thing he wants to know is who knew everybody. What's your relationship to everybody? So, but what did that look like? You know, the assistant director then picks up the firearm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What the hell? What the hell was that? And so then they pull a live round out, or at least what looks like a live round. So they call the armorer over. What the hell, right? Again, a child didn't lose his mother. Or the assistant director just grabs it off the table, takes it over to Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin grabs the firearm. 2, 3, 4, 5. What the hell was that? is this a live round? And then all of a sudden, an inexperienced armorer maybe gets fired or what have you, or an investigation is made onto how a live round could have possibly gotten into a firearm. Now, were they using, instead of using snap caps, were they using expended rounds instead of snap caps? How stupid would that be? And so I've got a bit of footage that I prepared for you here. That's what that looks like. And so if the assistant director were looking at something like that, there's no way that they would reasonably been able to tell the difference between a live round and an expended round. So I hope that that wasn't the case. I couldn't possibly imagine that it was, but again, it might be. That might be one of the scenarios that that we're looking at. But as well, this is what an empty firearm looks like from the point of view of somebody checking. And so the responsibility here is pretty clear as far as the ultimate shot goes. Alec Baldwin was responsible for basically what one of us would have been accused of as playing with a loaded gun. It doesn't matter that somebody handed you the firearm and said, oh, this isn't loaded. That excuse just does not fly with me at all. You saw how little time and effort it would have taken to make sure that that firearm wasn't loaded, no matter what you were then doing with it. Do I believe the cock and bull story about the firearm going off as he was in an arc? You know, no, I don't. I believe it did go off while he was in an arc, like they said, because there's, you know, eyewitness testimony that says that that's what happened. But do I believe that he didn't actually pull the trigger? No, not for a moment. You saw, as I was just trying to work out how to do that quickly, right? That it's just something that's liable to happen. That's why you do the practice. That's why you figure out where your safety zone is going to be set up, protecting the lens of a very expensive camera. The lens alone is in the tens of thousands of dollars. Cameras cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, so you're not going to be pointing a gun with blanks at your camera. So I hope that this helped add some clarity as to what went on. There are props that are designed to be seen in the background. Those aren't even in the purview of the armorer, really. I wouldn't expect so. And then you have the hero guns that are on set because they're a safe alternative to trying to recreate this yourself. You've already decided you're going to make a Western movie. There are all kinds of people out there that know exactly what these guns are supposed to look and work like. Right? So now it's up to you to set a safe environment so that you can film your movie and not have anybody die over something so silly and frivolous. Now, the good news to this is that this doesn't happen often. Brandon Lee was the last one that this very similar thing happened. I don't personally believe that it was a squib. In his case, I also believe that it was probably a hot round, but I'll let that go. So from the standpoint of who is legally responsible to this, I'll let the lawyers chime in, but what it's sounding like to me is that the assistant director and Alec Baldwin are likely at least guilty of negligent homicide, if not manslaughter, depending on, or involuntary manslaughter, depending on what some of the other circumstances are. And the armorer, she is guilty of manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter as far as I'm concerned. The whole idea that she was responsible for this set and that she stored live ammunition with the blanks according to the affidavit. We've got a link to that in the description if you want to have a look at the entire thing there. And allowing cast and crew to use the hero weapons to fire, to do live fire on set into the desert. If that's true, yeah, that's I can't even believe it. I can't even believe it. I don't know what to say. Well, thanks for bearing with us. I don't know that I will be covering this again. I think we've gone over it in about as much detail as we possibly can. I will follow the comment section as I always do and try and answer any lingering questions that might be there. But again, I think we covered this pretty extensively. Hopefully folks have learned a little bit about how these firearms operate and why we use, why the cinematic industry uses live, real firearms to do it, again, for safety reasons. That's one of the things that's maybe counterintuitive, but that's absolutely true. And thanks for joining us. Hopefully we've got some new subscribers here that are not only interested in this kind of thing, but maybe also interested in some of the technical topics that we cover. And so thanks for joining us.